I am a human being. I'm a man. I'm a Caucasian, even though I'm 1/4 Spanish, hence the name David Diego Rodriguez, pero no hablo español. Que lástima. I am an American. I'm a Hoosier by transplant. Can I claim? I've lived here more than half of my life. Can I be a Hoosier now? All right, so I'm a Hoosier. I'm an Indianapolis resident. I lived in Indianapolis, the city, for the whole time, 33 years. I'm a baby boomer. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4, 2 children and 2 in-laws, a daughter-in-law and a son-in-law. I'm a pastor. I'm a foodie, sometimes insufferable foodie. I'm an amateur chef. I'm a musical theater fan. I'm a Colts fan. I'm a Pacers fan. And I am a Christian. Now, those words and phrases describe me. And all of them but one help you to understand me more. One of them is not really clear. The last one, Christian. The nickname Christian really doesn't help at all if you want to get to know me, because it could mean a lot of different things. For example, if I declare myself to be a Christian, does it mean I'm a good moral guy? Is that what I mean? Does it mean I'm not Jewish or not Muslim or not Hindu? Does it mean I'm an American? If I say that I'm a Christian, does it mean I'm religious? Does it mean I'm a churchgoer? Does it mean I'm politically right-wing? Is that what it means? Does it mean I'm politically left-wing? Does it mean I believe in a literal Jesus, or does it mean I can believe in a mythical Jesus? If I declare that I'm a Christian, do I believe in the Bible as truth, or is the Bible a bunch of make-up stories? What is it that I believe? You don't know if I call myself Christian, because it could mean any of those things or none of those things. The word has lost its meaning. It's confusing, it's tired, and it's controversial. Which is interesting, because at one point in history, it was a pretty important nickname. It was given to us by the Roman government in the 1st century in a city of Antioch. It says in Acts chapter 11, it was in the city of Antioch that Christians were first called Christians. It was a slur of sorts, because they didn't know what to call this little cult that was growing. They thought it was a cult, who followed the teachings of Jesus and tried to live their life like him. So they called us little Christs. That's what Christian means, little Christ. In time, the church actually took it as a badge of honor, and you can see this in a letter that the Apostle Peter wrote to a bunch of people, and he said, "It is to no shame to suffer for being a Christian. Praise God for the privilege of being called by his name." It was all good at one point. But in the intervening years, in the 2,000 years since then, it has become a catch-all for all kinds of definitions and meanings. And what it does, when we see the confusion over the term Christian, it shines a light on our identity. We have an identity crisis worldwide. We're struggling with it. Who are we? Who indeed are we who identify in big or tiny ways with Jesus? What did Jesus intend for us to be? How did he intend us to act and to live? In these days of social confusion and political upheaval, and in a time when the world is groaning, it's not the world groaning. The world is groaning, like Paul said in Romans. It is groaning in its brokenness, and our families and individuals are crying out for direction. If there was ever a time that we should know who we are, it would be now. So with that backdrop, this summer, we've tried to clear things up. This past summer, starting in June, we have studied Jesus. We've looked at many stories in his life, but we've looked at him with a bias, with a pair of lenses as we've looked at the Gospel of Mark. What kind of person was he trying to create? We looked at his stories through the lens of mentoring, that Jesus was not just teaching as a prophet, he was mentoring a group of men and women. How was he shaping them? What was he hoping they would become? If we could get a clue of what he was trying to make them to be, we can get an idea of what he wants to make us to be. Our text all summer long was the Gospel of Mark, written by Mark. but it was likely the memoirs of Peter, who walked with Jesus. And Mark was the one who heard the stories of Peter and wrote them down, and we now have it in the Gospel of Mark. So, we're wrapping up that series. I made a line of scrimmage decision on, football fans. I walked up to the line of scrimmage and I called an audible, and here's what we're going to do the next 3 weeks. I've heard from so many of you about how important this is that I want to make sure that we review this well. So today, I'm going to review half of the summer. Next week, I will review the other half of the summer. We'll cover all the big ideas we looked at. And on September 1 and 2, that weekend, which is my last weekend preaching before I go on my sabbatical, we're going to talk application. You don't want to miss it because I'm not going to pull any punches. And it's going to be direct, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I've taken we had 11 big ideas this summer. I took one of them, I broke it in two, so that we now have 12 big ideas that I'm going to look at. 6 of them this week, 6 of them next week. This is from all summer long. And I've ordered these 12 ideas into 4 broad categories, which are, as followers of Jesus, how are we to treat people? Okay, we'll look at that in a minute. Second category, as followers of Jesus, what is our calling? What's our mission? Next week, we'll look at, as followers of Jesus, who are we to be inside? My character. And next week, we will wrap it up with looking, as followers of Jesus, how are we to relate to God? Now, I can only take a few moments on each. If you're taking notes, they're going to be numbered. And here's the good news for those of you that wonder how long this sermon's going to go. You'll know by the number of points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When I get to 4 or 5, get excited because you know we're getting near the end. Okay? Now, before I get into it, one other tool I would recommend to you. We had a great group of interns this summer from all over the United States. One of them, a student at Princeton, his name is Nico Ravenna, grew up kind of here at Grace Church. He made a devotional, like a daily devotional. You can walk through the scriptures and read. Incredible on this series. We will have copies of that next weekend at the info desk, and we'll also be sending you a link to a digital version this week. So take a look at it. Nico's done a wonderful job. Category 1, as followers of Jesus, how are we to treat people? Now, the answer to that, we looked at this 3 weeks ago. Answer to that in Jesus' eyes is unequivocal. Love your neighbor as yourself. In Mark chapter 12 is where Jesus was confronted with a religious leader who said to him, "What if you could summarize for me, Jesus, all the commands into one command, what would it be?" And Jesus said, "All right, here's the summary. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." He's put the two, he conflated the two, and he said, all the other laws really ride on these two. Now, next week, we'll look at the love God part. This week, I want to look at the love people part. If you remember, was that 3 weeks ago? I summarized that whole Mark 12 story into love God totally, love people completely. So let's talk about this love people completely business. Now, this command to love people as yourself is so intense that it's a little bit brain numbing. Here's what I mean. When Jesus said love people, he chose the word agape, which is an unconditional, unqualified, unrestricted devotion and affection with an extreme bias towards the needs of the others. If you just sat in that definition for a minute. Love is unconditional, unqualified, unrestricted devotion to other people. That's hard to get my head around. Well, Jesus took it to the extreme. I think it was the Gospel of Matthew? Gospel of John, John 15. He said this. Here's how extreme this love is. He said, greater love has no one than this. There is no greater love than a person lay down their life for one's friends. Now, if you remember, we talked about this 3 weeks ago. The intention that Jesus had for us is that let's not mess around. Let's not try to diminish the import of this. If I'm truly going to love people, I've got to ask myself if I'm willing to die for people. That's the end game of love. That's the end game. Abraham Lincoln, looking out over the Gettysburg field of all these hundreds, I think it was tens of thousands, not 100,000s of men who had died, he said, you know what? These people knew how to love. This was their last full measure of devotion. I've been following, probably too much, the news of the past weeks in Charlottesville. Side note, on my way in this morning, I was listening to NPR, and there was a remarkable interview with a guy named Robert Lee, who is one of the great nephews of Robert E. Lee. He's a young pastor. The interview is a must listen to. Listen to it this afternoon when they post it. NPR Weekend Edition. Unbelievable. At any rate, since in the days in Charlottesville, I've seen a lot of outrage. I've heard a lot of calls for prayer. Again, a good idea. And there's been a lot of, again, in the Indianapolis Star this morning, the same thing, lots of calls for love, like hashtag love wins, hashtag love over fear. Well, let's be clear about something. The kind of love that's necessary to change this world is the kind of love that is mirrored in our love for God. Jesus makes it, this is so controversial. The love you have for God, that same level of love you have for God is the same level of love you should have for people. Which means we can't limit our love for people to social media comments. We can't limit our love for people to random acts of kindness. Our love for people must be premeditated and determined to show people the full measure of our devotion. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with that level of love? So here was our first big idea of the summer. Followers of Jesus love people in the most extreme ways possible. Now let's go a little deeper into that, because twice in this series we went deeper. For example, Amy, when she preached out of Mark chapter 2, she told the story of how Jesus went to the home of a guy named Levi who was a tax collector. And Mark records this story in Mark chapter 2, and he said there were many tax collectors and disreputable sinners there. And then he recorded this, and when the Pharisees saw Jesus eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with such scum? It's a great translation of that word. Why does he eat with such scum? Jesus hung out with scum. Now, Amy forced us to wrestle with some tough questions about us and the scum in our life. Are there people out there that you would rather not hang out with? Are there people out there that make you uneasy or uncomfortable? People that you strongly disagree with? People whose lifestyle doesn't match yours? People that are so different from you or that are difficult or carry around a lot of baggage? People that you might say are scum? Amy suggested, and I agree with her, that as the body of Christ, we've done some really significant damage. Because she said, I agree with her, that there's a big world out there that views us Christians as judgmental and self-righteous and angry towards others. I agree with her that we've brought this on us by our words and actions. And I think it's contrary to everything that Jesus was about. No, we can't wait for the world to get cleaned up so we can relate to it. We can't wait for the world to get presentable. We need to engage people in whatever shape we find them and let the Holy Spirit take the rest, do the rest. She quoted Maya Angelou, at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. How do you make people feel? How do you make people feel? Which led to the second big idea then. Followers of Jesus meet people right where they are. Now, Barry went further in his sermon in, I think it was first week of July or whatever. He reminded us that this complete love of people must include this concept that he called paying attention. He pointed this out from the stories in Mark chapter 5. There were two overlapping stories in Mark chapter 5. So a guy named Jairus came up to Jesus and said, Jesus, my little girl is sick. Can you come to visit my little girl and bring healing or something to her? Jesus, of course, agreed, and he said, let's go. Well, there's a clump of people then walking down the road to Jairus' house. Jesus, his followers, Jairus, all these people. And in the middle of it was this woman. The woman had a problem. She had a bleeding problem. She was an outcast because of her bleeding problem. She was desperate because of her bleeding problem. I'm sure she was a complete mess. I don't know how she wormed her way into the crowd, but somehow she got in the crowd, and it said she reached out. She was so desperate, and she touched Jesus' clothing in hopes that maybe even just touching him would bring healing. And Jesus all of a sudden said, "Who touched my robe? Who touched my robe?" Now at this point, he's Jesus. He could have said, "Lady, back off," or "Lady, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I just told this guy, I'm sorry, I've got to go deal, his daughter is dying, so I'm sorry, I can't help you." But what Jesus did at that moment was somewhat unthinkable in the day, because this woman was an outcast. He stopped and he paid attention to her, to the point where eventually he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." He acknowledged her, he dignified her, and he healed her. He cared for her physical needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, relational needs, and he expects as much from us. Remember, this was mentoring going on. This wasn't Jesus just changing the world. This was Jesus mentoring his young followers to do as I do, not just as I say. Do you pay attention to people? Here's a little test. Next time you have lunch with somebody, or a cup of coffee, or you're sitting in their home, I want you to gauge in that conversation how much you talk and how much they talk. Walk away. Now, most of you probably would not be able to add it because you think that they did most of the talking. But I'm telling you, I've been with most of you. Not most of you, a lot of you. Okay, and I know that's my job. That, as a pastor/counselor, I want to listen to people. But I'm telling you, it is not unusual to sit down and have a lunch with somebody, and I walk up and I've gotten 3 words in. Oh, really? Pay attention to whether you dominate the conversation. Do you talk? Do people not want to have coffee with you because, they tend to drone on and on? How do people feel about you in this regard? Do you pay attention to people? Are you sensitive? Are you caring? The third big idea was followers of Jesus pay attention to the needs of those around them. So let me wrap up this category, move on to the second category. If you love people the way Jesus wants us to love people, you'll sacrifice whatever's necessary. You won't just have a singular list of people that you relate to because you don't want to deal with scum out there. You'll deal with people, whoever they are, mess and all. And you will be a person who is unusually interested in others. Tell me about that. That's interesting. Fill me in. It'd be kind of cool if both of you could have coffee and you're both paying attention to each other and no one says anything. No, you tell me. No, you tell me. No, you tell me. No, you tell me. If that starts happening, we're in a good place. Establish your reputation as one who loves. This should be important to you. Establish your reputation as one who loves. All right, second category. As followers of Jesus, what is our calling? And by calling, I mean our mission, our motivation, our reason for being. So we studied this off and on during the summer, and we started, I think it was the second week of the series, we were looking in Mark chapter 1, and noticed that Jesus was kind of, this is an overstatement. What he did to his initial followers was kind of cruel. It wasn't cruel. It was Jesus, okay? And he knew exactly what he was doing. But that's what it feels like, because he says, "Come, follow me, follow me, follow me." And then he takes them, and he immediately takes these novices. Remember, the boys in particular were as dumb as a box of hammers, right? The boys were, because that's just what boys are. But he takes these men and women, and he immediately takes them to the home of a really sick person, and then takes them over to this town where there's people writhing on the ground and foaming at the mouth and demon-possessed and probably talking in other voices. Remember, this is like their first, "Come follow me, let's see what happens." And then he shows up at the home of a leper, one of the biggest outcasts of the day. Now remember, he's trying to show them, don't just do what I do, but don't just do what I say, do what I do. Here's this leper, defies protocol, and moved with compassion, Jesus reaches out and touches the leper and says, "Be healed." Jesus made it clear that we don't shy away from a scrap. Followers of Jesus, we don't hang back when it's nasty. We have grit. We have backbone. We have resilience. Now, if you were here when I preached this sermon in June, let's see if you can fill in this sentence. The way Jesus described our life and our mission was like this: when it gets uncomfortable, we don't run away, we run to it. We run to it. As followers of Jesus, we run to it, the pain, the danger, the tragedy, and the chaos. This is what we do. Now, Tim took this one step further, and he reminded us in July that when we run to these dangerous places and places of chaos and insanity, we have a goal in mind, and that's to bring freedom and peace. He told the story in Mark chapter 5 of Jesus coming upon, they get out of the boats and immediately are confronted with a naked, deranged man who had been living in this cemetery, probably in filth, so demon-possessed that he's got superhuman strength. And by the way, this happens, folks. This is a real thing. This is not just a mythical story. This really happens. I've seen it with my own eyes. Superhuman strength, breaking chains. The guy was out of his mind and filled with a legion of demons. Now, Tim suggests that, again, that Jesus was mentoring his followers and us in that what we should do is move into that. I mean, this guy was the scum of the scum, moved into his life with the purpose of bringing peace and chaos. Tim said it this way: followers of Jesus bring sanity and peace into the world's desperate situations. Gosh, what's happening in the United States now? These issues of race, and our job is to bring sanity and peace, not division. Sanity and peace as we establish our reputation of love. This is our job. This is our job. This is our calling. Nobody else gets this. If anyone else decides to engage in these issues of racism in this country, it's their ideological hobby. If we do it, it's our job. That's what we are to be about. Now, you've noticed, you should be excited because you've seen I've done number 5. I only had one left, okay? If anybody's keeping track. And I want to wrap this up by reminding us this all sounds noble and courageous. Yes, I'm going to establish a reputation of love. I'm going to be one who pays attention. I'm going to bring peace and chaos into horrible situations. And yes, Dave, I will try to hang out with scum. Okay? But here's a warning. Here's what we learned in July. We looked at in Mark chapter 6. We got a sobering reminder of what happens to us when we do this. In a story out of Mark chapter 6, we saw Jesus take it on the chin. He goes to his hometown, he starts preaching there, and it says in Mark chapter 6, they scoffed at him. He's just a carpenter. They were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. He started to get persecuted. Jesus, the Son of God, healing people, is persecuted. And then we looked at other passages of Scripture to remind us that, yeah, and if I'm going to do what he wants me to do, it's going to happen to me too. He said, you'll be arrested, you'll be persecuted and killed, you'll be hated all over the world because you are my followers. Now go and remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Had an interesting conversation this morning with several of our production guys as we were getting ready to start. And he said, when do you suppose that when this persecution is really going to happen? Is it when we're doing acts of social justice? I said, no. We're going to get persecuted when we look people in the face and proclaim that there's one way to God, and it's through Jesus Christ. Okay? That's when we're going to get persecuted. The problem is, let's get this equation. We get persecuted when we proclaim that Jesus is the only way. Why are we not getting persecuted in the United States? Because we are not proclaiming that Jesus is the only way. We will get persecuted if we do that. We're not getting persecuted now. And by the way, remember I told you the story from the book Insanity of God about a guy named Dimitri? Remember the persecution he faced? He was jailed, threatened with death, the whole thing. That's because he maintained that Jesus was the only way. In that same book, Nick Ripken, who was the author, it's a pseudonym, Nick Ripken, The Insanity of God, said this: one of the most accurate ways to detect and measure the activity of God is to note the amount of opposition that is present. The stronger the persecution, the more significant the spiritual vitality of the believers. Ooh. So let's put that backwards. The more significant the spiritual vitality of the believers, the stronger the persecution. I guess I have to ask ourselves if we're spiritually vital or not. 6, followers of Jesus then who proclaim Christ face persecution. So there they are. There's 6 ideas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next week, my sermon title will be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So all of you human beings out there, I think most of you listening to me are human beings, men and women, boys and girls. If you like to think of yourself as Christian, if that's the way you want to describe yourself, here's a test of your authentication, whether you're authentically Christian. Here they are. Look at the screen. What's your reputation? Is that you? Next week, we'll do even more soul searching as we review what we've learned this summer about Jesus and you.